The focus there is to find regions that we feel very good about supporting. And it's a pretty tricky process for us to find teas that we're really excited, because once we commit to sourcing, we really want that to be a long-term commitment.
Yeah.
And so it has to balance, like it has to come from places that we feel good about supporting and that we can learn from at the farming level. It has to be teas that we can sell, so it has to be at good quality. It has to be good enough price that we can reasonably present it.
Right.
One of the, I think, strengths or limitations of what we do is that because we work all the way back to origin, it just takes a little bit more time to bring something in. But when we do, we're really excited to be able to keep working with the farmers and keep seeing year over year how things change for them.
Welcome to the Herbalist Hour. This is where community gather, merging the power of people and flowers, the sweet and the bitter to the salty, the sour. Umami, it's time for the Herbalist Hour.
Welcome back to the Herbalist Hour. Today I'm really excited to have on my good friend, Raj Vable. Welcome to the show, Raj.
Hey, thanks so much, Mason.
Yeah, really excited to be here in the UP.
That's right.
Hanging out with you. We're former Oregon buddies,
That's
but
right.
we both moved to the Midwest, came up here to visit you and interview you, and I'm really excited to learn a little bit more about your background. What was a young Raj like?
Yeah, I grew up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Actually, maybe I'll start with my parents.
Sure.
So they grew up in India. In the 70s, they migrated to the US for their work and then ended up teaching at a tiny university about 2 hours away from here, Michigan Tech University, which is where I was born and brought up. So growing up, I didn't have a super strong connection to India. I kind of thought of it as the place that my parents were from and where my sister and I got kind of against our will dragged in the summer. That's unfortunately sort of initially how it began. But then I went downstate for school and I was studying electrical engineering, and I was in love with music. I wanted to go into sound recording to record the bands that I loved growing up. But, you know, life happened. I realized I wasn't going to ever be good enough to actually go down the music route. And then I watched Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth. Did you see that?
I did. Yeah, right when it came out.
Yeah.
Loved it at the time for sure.
It kind of like was a shake for me. And so that changed my trajectory. So in my senior year of college, I started a project in my mother's ancestral village in southern India to power a school with solar. And that project really was the first time I began to explore my own Indian identity and really work directly with rural communities, and I found I just loved it. And so, yeah, things changed. I really kind of pivoted in my life towards working with rural communities in India, first in engineering related stuff, but I moved out to Oregon for grad school. And then after that, got a Fulbright to go back to India, and it was in that stretch that I want to get out of engineering. I want to stay involved with these communities, but I want to do something else. They're agricultural communities, and so tea was a kind of a personal interest of mine. JT.
Yeah, I love JT.
In Eugene.
Yeah.
I had gone into his shop a bunch of times and fallen in love with tea. And so, yeah, I was just looking for a way to kind of connect things that I cared about with things that I thought I could do something helpful with. Yeah. And so I talked to some farmers in India about growing tea. And Young Mountain, my tea company, basically began with a promise to this one group of farmers that if they would grow tea, I'd set up a company in the US to sell it.
When you were younger, did you feel as if you would be an entrepreneur when you were older?
No, not at all. I feel like actually I was pretty reluctant to even consider business. Yeah. I thought of business as capitalism. Like that's evil. Kind of the extent of it.
Yeah, totally.
And both my parents were professors. Yeah. So it's not as if there was any kind of family background in business. Sure. So yeah, it was actually really only working with nonprofits and seeing that I love the work that the impact focus of the nonprofit world, but I was finding myself helping these nonprofits write more grants. And so I saw the funding for the organization was separate from the actual program and implementation. And so I was very interested in figuring out models where the financing, the funding was built into the work itself. Yeah. And so the idea of social entrepreneurship, using business to achieve social or environmental goals, was a really compelling way for me to still do some positive stuff in the world, but also have the kind of funding and impact connected. So that the idea being that these teas, as an example, they are being purchased from farmers at fair rates and supporting some other activities. So if the business does well and grows, we're buying more tea, and so the impact grows at the same time. So the whole entrepreneurship thing for me was way less about sort of creating business and more about how do you build financial sustainability into the work itself.
Yeah, definitely. Can you tell us more about Young Mountain, like the early origins and like where we're at now today?
Yeah, sure. Started in a garage in eastern Eugene, Laurel Hill.
Yeah.
I had a co-founder in the beginning, so it was really wonderful to have a partner in the initial stages. We realized early on that his interests were primarily sort of in the academic world, and so he went and got a PhD. And largely it was in the initial stages doing the work myself. And I was really trying to spend as much time with the farmers at origin, studying tea as I could, and really kind of figuring out how to bridge the two worlds of like the mountains, the Himalayas of India with tea drinkers in the US. And towards that, I felt like I needed, for my own sort of integrity, to really feel deeply connected to the farmers, because I didn't want it to be sort of a greenwashing, or like a casual set of relationships that we just talk about the number of farmers that we're working with and like not actually have personal connection. So I spend usually 2 or 3 times a year going to India. Initially they were for pretty long stretches, like several months at a time. Over time, as we've realized, like really what we need to figure out is how to grow the business in the US. That amount of time is reduced, but it's still frequent. I'm going to go in a couple weeks for 3 weeks. And basically where we're at now is we work with farmers that are in 5 regions of India and Nepal, and we source around 30 teas total. And that kind of number fluctuates, which is the fun part about specialty teas. You get to like take different seasonal offerings, and so that number doesn't stay fixed. But they're all organic teas. They're all primarily single origin teas, meaning they haven't been blended or flavored. They're just the leaves of the Camellia sinensis plant, just that one plant, but grown in different soils and processed in different styles. So that's the sort of sourcing side of it. And then in the US, we sell primarily in the US. There's a little bit into Canada and a little bit into Europe. But yeah, we sell it under our own brand, Young Mountain Tea. We also sell it in bulk to other tea companies. And we offer it both loose leaf as well as in tea bags. And so, yeah, it's either direct to tea drinkers themselves or through other companies. But all of it is collectively trying to figure out, like, how do we elevate the role of farmers in the supply chain, and how do we also create more transparency so that people just know where their tea comes from.
So you mentioned Camellia sinensis, that's the green, white, black tea variety. Yep. Did I hear that you started, you released a herbal tea of some sort? What was the...
That was right, yeah. Just one.
Okay. Is it peppermint?
Yeah, peppermint.
Where are you sourcing that, and what was the reason for picking up an herb?
Yeah, it was driven by a request from a customer.
Okay.
A larger one who said, we really like your teas, but they've got a campus, and so they said their employees wanted to have an herbal option. Okay. And so, yeah, it's coming from a couple of farmer regions in southern Washington.
Oh, okay.
The Columbia River Basin that we work with. It's been very interesting to recognize how different it is sourcing something domestically versus internationally. It turns out it's a lot easier.
I was going to say, yeah, totally.
So it's actually been really wonderful. We've only done one shipment from them so far, but it's off to a good start, and it's been a good reminder. Like, I think within the specialty tea world, it can kind of become its own little echoing chamber, where we think, like, if it's not from these leaves, it's not tea.
Right.
And it's been a good reminder, like, herbal magic is in everything. And actually, it's something that Mitra and I, my wife, who's our designer, we drink peppermint pretty regularly in the evenings now.
Awesome. Well, why don't we try some of Young Mountain teas here?
Let's.
It'd be great if we could maybe taste it. We could talk about the flavor, and then maybe talk about the overarching story about the tea as well, where it comes from and what region and whatnot.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
So I've got 3 teas here, kind of highlighting the way that one plant can go in so many directions. A white tea from northern India, a green tea from Nepal, and then a black tea that's also from Nepal.
Nice.
So I thought we could go white, green, black, kind of lightest to darkest, which is normally how we drink several types of tea. Does that sound good to you?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Now, is this called like a tea ceremony or a cupping, or what are we doing here? What
it's somewhere in between those two.
Okay, cool. Awesome.
It's like elements of a tea ceremony, but usually it would be a much longer process where we'd also have some food or some snacks.
Gotcha.
Sorry I didn't prep those in
That's
advance.
all good. Tea's great.
But what we have is the teas themselves, the tea table, which is, you can pour water into it. So there's slits on here, so we're not going to make a mess even if I splash around a little bit.
I want one of these.
This is called a gaiwan, which is a traditional Chinese teapot. You can show this off a little bit.
Yeah.
I love these things. They're like the simplest form of teapot, but kind of holds it so the camera can see it too. Yeah. But it's just a curved wall. There's no filter or anything, and you just crack the lid and then pour it off like that. So without any additional pieces, you can make tea. And what I love about gaiwans in particular is that they're really easy to clean versus those filter-based teapots where you have to kind of scratch the tea leaves, the dry tea leaves out of the metal baskets. There's none of that.
This is probably the old school way of doing it anyways.
This is the traditional way for sure. Yeah. And so, this is a white tea from northern India called Kumail White. It's from the same region that when I started the company with the promise to the group of farmers, it was in this region called Kumail. And today we're working with the same set of farmers to set up a processing facility that will co-own with them.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's
that
super
so cool.
exciting.
Yeah.
And actually this trip that I'm about to go on is to break ground on the factory. Wow. We call them factories in the tea world, but processing facility, same thing. And so, I'm really excited to share it. I'm going to do what's called a rinse steep. So just let it steep for a couple seconds and then you can see this is the power of the table. You just make a mess and it doesn't actually make a mess. And that wakes up the leaf. It kind of brings it to life and also cleans it out a little bit.
I've had many cups of tea in my life. I've never done that one time.
Oh, yeah? Well,
I need to.
It's really fun. And it just kind of contains the whole tea making experience.
Sure.
It gives a little frame. And I am going to cheat a little bit, and I've got a timer here. So that would not be part of a tea ceremony, having timers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because the idea of being present and sort of just sitting with the tea is there. Right. And it's often usually done with some level of silence, so that you're just really contemplating the actual interaction between the leaf and the water.
Would tea ceremonies be like a group activity, or is it more like a meditative solo thing?
It can be both, definitely. I think for myself, when I make tea for myself, I try to treat it like a ceremony, like my own personal ritual as a practice. Mm-hmm. In just presence, just being with the tea and just, taking that little bit of break, to meditate and to just exist. And what I love is thinking about like the water itself. And a lot of Chinese philosophy is that there's many health benefits of tea that we can talk about if you'd like, but the biggest one is that you're drinking a lot of hot water. And so I found that this is where it kind of like moves out of maybe science and into personal belief, that there's a different type of energy that you get from the tea if you pay attention to the steeping process. I think that there's an interaction between our attention and the actual way that the leaf is uptaked into our body. I don't have any science to back that up, but I can say from experience it's definitely been the way tea is for me. And also that, when you do it in groups, that it kind of amplifies, as long as everybody that's there is also focused. So, the ceremony, I think, is actually best done in small groups. Beyond 5 people, it begins to sort of feel different. Although there is this wonderful, fairly modern way of doing tea called wuwo, which is where there's groups that sit in a circle and you make tea. And I'm not an expert, so for woo-woo people who practice woo-wo, they might critique this. I hope I get it right. But generally, you make tea in a circle for, I think, the first 2 people to the left. So you make 3 cups of tea, but it's this like really beautiful process of everybody collectively sharing that experience. So it can kind of grow and shrink to the size. I like to do it in this kind of setting, like maybe a couple people.
Well, you're speaking to an audience of herbalists, and a lot of herbalists love science, but they also love, the energy that we put into the plants or the meal or whatever we're creating. So I think a lot of people will vibe with that.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Or like, when you say you cooked with love,
right?
Like that actually means something.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna start doing it. Get
Cool.
that sharp little. I am gonna cheat a little bit by using this little handheld filter, just because sometimes the little pieces.
A lot of cheating going along.
A lot of cheating.
Yeah, on here.
And so this is the first steep of this tea, but there are definitely multiple infusions you can get. If you want to smell it, that's actually my favorite part, just cracking it open and breathing in the aroma of the wet leaf.
It's a beautiful color too.
Yeah. Sorry.
Oh. So first steeping almost implies there might be another steeping.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, I like to steep at least 3 times, please.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers. A little tea ASMR here.
Can I tell you a little bit about this tea?
Please.
So it's made in the spring. The tea plants go to sleep, which they're doing right about now. Late October, early November, they go into the winter hibernation. They sleep through the winter, and then in this region, it's typically early April that they wake up and they start producing the first leaf of the year. And that really young harvest, young growth, is what makes the best white teas. So this is typically the first harvest of the year that the farmers will pluck. With a white tea, it's very minimally processed. So it's really becomes a testament to the tea farmers' ability to know the right time to pick the right bushes, and that's both relative to the plant growth as well as the ambient conditions. And so, they bring the harvest into the factory, the processing facility. They lay it out on these long troughs to reduce the water content in the leaf. And white tea, in comparison to other teas, has a fairly long withering step. I think this particular lot was around 30 hours. And after it's withered, they just bring it over to a dryer and run it at a low temperature just to turn off any oxidizing from happening. And that's it. So it gets withered and dried. The other teas we'll try have a little bit more processing to it. But this, for me, is like a reflection of just minimal touching. And I love, personally, that it has, like, you feel that early spring growth. It's very fresh and floral. Light, but still with substance. And with white teas in particular, I feel that a lot of times people don't really like it because they say it just tastes like hot water, which can be the case with some white teas, but hopefully you feel, like as with this one, that it's light flavor, but there's texture. There's like a mouthfeel. There's a heaviness, and it sits on the tongue in a pleasant way. And so that combination of comparatively light flavor, but more heavy body is my favorite part about a white tea.
Yeah, I have a tendency to really like strong flavors. Last night, you and I were talking about pu'er, which I think goes through a much more heavy, like fermented stage or something like that, and creating much more like funky, complex flavor. But just tasting this, it's so fresh tasting. Like I could picture like spring in my mouth right now,
Yeah.
So.
Amanda, can I pour you some?
Yeah. I love that. Thank you.
Yeah. Do you have your cup?
I do.
Spring in my mouth.
And this was, we did about 2.5 minutes on the first steep.
Yeah.
And usually go a little longer on the second one.
Thank you.
It was awesome.
Yeah. A little tiny topper.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I would love if you're willing to do one more steep on this, just to kind of do the tea justice.
Absolutely.
And we're using water that's pretty far below boil. If you've got a thermometer and care about it, this is at 175, 180, but practically that's just like the water isn't reaching that raging boil stage. It's not a full boil. It's just really when the water begins to kind of rumble lightly. And I really like to use this glass teapot because I love watching the energy, like the heat. You can see it in the water.
fun little story. There was one of those in Airbnb Amanda and I stayed at recently. And I was really tired. And I thought it was something you put on a stovetop. And I put it on the stovetop, and then it melted plastic everywhere. And while it's on my mind, does Young Mountain also sell like cups and these tables and stuff like that?
We did, and then we stopped.
Okay.
We realized, well, for what we want to do for the mission, it's really good to stay focused on the tea itself. Tea ware, like it's fun. It's complicated, and it's hard to sell it in a way that actually is gonna make enough money for our business. I think it's best to buy tea from the people tea ware from the people who make it rather through intermediaries like us. So
it's part of the entrepreneur journey is trying things. Does it work? Is it worth it? That kind of thing. So I get it.
Yeah, and also like we just, we bought a bunch and then people didn't really buy it. So we just have a lot of money tied up in tea ware.
Sure.
Which, didn't really make sense in the long run.
And again, it's not really part of the mission of Young Mountain anyways.
No.
It's more about the farmers and that livelihood.
One of the things that was an interesting project that we haven't really gone deeper into was, so tea ware is very culturally specific. Like this is primarily like a Chinese style setup that we're doing right now. And so like China has specific tea ware, Japan has its own tea ware, like British, like tea time has its own tea ware. But because in India, there wasn't historically a domestic, like there wasn't an internal culture of tea drinking. It's something the British brought in. Right now, the tea culture is really around chai, which is, the beautifully, heavily spiced milk, sugar, fiery black tea. But these kinds of teas, there isn't a tea ware associated with it. So one of the fun projects that we began into, but kind of let go of, was working with ceramicists in India to figure out what does this Indian specialty aesthetic look like and feel like. And that really sinks pretty well into our mission, which is like, can we create a bridge between maybe the farmers, but Indian culture more generally, and American or just international audiences, and make the tea ware reflect the culture that the tea plants come from. Again, it was like a really cool, exciting project, and realized like, but that's actually not quite where we want to put our energy right now, but maybe sometime in the future.
Sure.
Once we've got this tea factory up and running, then I think we'll have a lot more time to play around.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the Young Mountain team, is it currently you and Mitra essentially, as well as the farmers, of course? Okay, Lucas, gotcha.
Yeah, we had a warehouse. I guess you had asked me in the beginning what the status is, and I didn't totally fully answer that. We had a warehouse and facility in Springfield, Oregon. Once Mitra and I moved to Michigan, we recognized it was just tricky to sort of have that remote dynamic. And so we wound things down and shifted all our operations to a partner that's outside of LA in Southern California. And that's actually made our lives a lot easier because now we can focus on where we can shine, which is working with the farmers and helping tell their stories direct to tea drinkers. And really the parts in between, the importing, the warehousing, the production, the order fulfillment, where we've handed that off to a partner who's really well equipped to do that. And so it was a tricky set of, changes that are fairly recent. But now the dust is settled and like, oh wow, this actually feels great. Like we can do what we can be unique at and let the pros handle the operations. But so presently it's 3.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I'll pour this out. This is the second steep, so we did about 4 minutes on this one.
Which was about a minute longer than the first one?
That's right.
Yeah.
Actually, I need to finish mine.
What did you think, Amanda?
I liked it.
Yeah.
Can I pour you a second steep?
Sure.
Yeah. We're all gonna get high on tea. That's really why I like that Portland tea festival. I drank tea for like 10 hours straight.
It's incredible. That like going back to like that idea of like ceremony and like community. It is really interesting, I think, like those tea festivals, the really fun part about them is that many people drinking that much tea, there is something that you start to feel.
You feel elevated.
Yeah. They call it getting like tea high or tea drunk.
Totally.
It's not like inebriated, but it's definitely not untouched mental activity. Like you definitely feel this like lift that I love. That's my favorite part about the tea festivals.
We talked about this a little bit last night as well, coffee versus tea, and I reach a certain point of drinking too much coffee.
Yeah.
Like I'll get headaches and stuff. I'm sure I could reach that point with tea too, but I just get more and more elevated, it feels like. I'm sure like maybe having tons of caffeine, maybe not the best thing for maybe if you have anxiety or whatever, but yeah, I don't reach that point with tea where I do with coffee.
Yeah, and you know, at least part of that is because tea made from the leaves of the Camellia sinensis, so black tea, green tea, white tea, matcha, oolong, pu'er, all of those styles. They have this compound in it called L-theanine. Are you familiar with that? Okay.
It's like brain, good for the brain.
That's right. Yeah. So it's correlated with the production of alpha waves, which our minds make when we're in a relaxed, calm state. So you get the lift from the caffeine, but it gets moderated and balanced by the presence of this other thing that's like basically gently tickling our brains and helping us feel relaxed and centered.
That's amazing.
So I think that's I think like and the level of antioxidants. Tea has a ton of antioxidants, and so that trifecta of a little bit of caffeine, a little bit of L-theanine, and a bunch of antioxidants is kind of what leads to that. The unique tea buzz.
Yeah. Well, you're getting into the medicinal benefits of green tea, which is the audience is loving, so thank you for that.
Yeah, and that's actually across all teas.
Yeah.
I mean, if it comes from the leaves of the Camellia sinensis plant, it's got all three of those compounds. Different amounts, based on a whole bunch of things, but yeah, kind of across the board. If you're drinking tea, you're going to get all three of those things.
I'm feeling it, man.
Cool. The one last thing about this tea is that this tea really represents the kind of collaborative spirit of Young Mountain, in that when began the company, these tea farmers were making primarily black tea. Not primarily, exclusively black tea, because that's Indian tea is traditionally black tea, and we can talk about the history of that if you'd like to. But because the same tea plant can make all these different styles, I brought a sample of a Bai Mudan white tea from China, and the tea maker, his name's Desmond, he crushed the tea in his hand and smelled it, and he said, if this is what you want, I can make it. And so it represents sort of the role that we can play in bringing new styles, and there's a little bit more conversation. We talked about how it's made traditionally, but then it's kind of the farmers taking it, using their creativity and expertise within tea to make the tea. So 2015 was the first time that they made this tea, and this is the 2022 harvest that we're drinking right now.
Wow.
So last year's harvest. And every year it gets better. And so that's really the heart of our work, is to work with the farmers to figure out how do we raise the quality of their tea so they can sell it for more, earn more, and then invest that into raising the quality of their lives and their communities.
So did I hear this was the first tea that you actually offered when you started Young Mountain?
No, it was the first tea that we really had a significant role in helping shape.
Okay.
But we learned also it's pretty hard to build a company around like one or two teas.
Right.
So we also initially realized, like, in order to figure out how to build a model that's farmer-centric, we're going to have to partner with existing producers that are already doing a lot of these things well.
Sure.
And so all the teas in our collection somehow are coming from producers that, they're all coming from producers that we think are pioneering some element of a model that we want to learn from. So these two teas from Nepal that we'll try next are both from the Tinjore Co-op, and that's Nepal's first community-owned approach to tea production. So the farmers own the land as well as the processing facility where the teas are made, which is unfortunately a very rare situation. Typically it's a mega estate where the tea is grown. The tea is basically monocultured on a mountainside, and then one single entity, usually a corporation, owns all of the land and the factory where the teas are made, and the farmers work the land but don't actually own anything. So one of the central things with Young Mountain to figure out is what happens when you shift ownership into the hands of the local communities. And so, yeah, that's the tea from Nepal that we'll try next.
That's awesome.
Great, and we're only one tea in.
Yeah, right. Just a quick break from the show to thank our presenting sponsor, Oshala Farm. Oshala Farm is a beautiful and vibrant certified organic herb farm based in Southern Oregon, where they grow and sell over 80 different plant species. The founders, Elise and Jeff Higley, have been longtime friends, so I highly trust their growing methods and ethics.
You'll love the potency and vibrancy of all the herbs they have to offer. To learn more and purchase their herbs and other organic goods, head to oshalafarm.com. So thanks once again to Oshala Farm for sponsoring the Herbalist Hour. Now back to the show. Enjoy.
On to the next.
Yes, sir.
Cool. And on to the next gaiwan. This is another form of a gaiwan. This one's a little bit
we're
easier.
switching up gaiwans.
Yeah, switching up the teapots so I don't have to clean in between.
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll move to green tea.
Awesome. So going from white, green to black, each step of the way, is it more and more processed?
Yeah, well, different types of processing. With green tea, the biggest difference between all three types is, in addition to where the tea is grown, the region, like the soils, the terroir, it's also, after the tea leaf has been harvested, the degree to which there's oxidizing. Mm-hmm. So oxidizing happens like when you bite an apple and it turns black. The same thing happens with the tea leaf. Once it's plucked off the bush, if there's any bruising, it starts to oxidize. So ideally, there's minimal unintentional oxidizing. There's always going to be a little bit,
sure,
just like happens when the tea farmers put it in the baskets that they harvest in. But a black tea is fully oxidized. So it's intentionally broken open and rolled and allowed to become this black color that we associate with black tea. Oh,
gotcha.
Maybe I should put some tea leaf in here. Whereas a green tea, and this is the one we're trying, is called Green Pearl. It's from Nepal again. The first thing they do is hit it with heat. And that heat turns off the enzyme that would catalyze the oxidation process. So even though the leaf then gets rolled and broken open, because what would allow that oxidizing process to happen has been basically turned off, it doesn't become a black tea.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
Okay.
I'm picturing in my head, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is called Green Pearl. It's kind of made in a style that's similar to a Chinese type of tea called gunpowder, where what gets harvested off the bush is the terminal bud and the first two leaves below it, and that's it. And so with high quality teas, that it's called the bud set, gets preserved all the way from when it's harvested to when it's finished brewing. So as we steep this, we'll see the leaf really open up. And yeah, that opening process, as the pearls unfurl, they release different flavors. And so again, yeah, this one we should steep at least twice. So here we go, here's the first one.
So Young Mountain, one of the missions is to help support the tea farmers, help own the farm itself.
That's right.
That's so cool. So basically when someone, not to sound like a sales commercial for you, but basically when someone's buying Young Mountain tea, they're directly helping support the farmers, help own their own land.
Yeah, and that takes different forms.
Yeah.
So the different regions we work in, each one has its own sort of set of conditions. Yeah. But the teas from Kumau are all, the farmers own the land already.
Yeah.
Which again, like compared to like Darjeeling and Assam, the more established regions, it's very rare to find examples where farmers own the land.
Yeah.
So in Kumau and Nepal, the producers would do, the farmers own the land, and in the Nilgiris in the south as well. And however, what's really the kind of the step that in my mind represents like real forms of empowerment is when the farmers own the processing facility.
Mm-hmm.
And typically that's out of reach for farmers because the upfront capital to set up a building and equip it with machinery is not what they have the ability to. And then also the technical know-how to make these styles of tea. Because again, like India didn't grow tea historically. The British brought it in and sort of, to be honest, forced it on Indian communities. So there isn't an inbuilt familiarity with how to process styles of tea. So both the upfront capital as well as the understanding of how to make the teas has not historically been something that the farmers held. So shifting that into the farmers' hands is really, that's the soul of our work. And so with this facility that we're setting up in Kumau, which is supported both by USAID, Frontier Co-op is supporting it in a big way, and also...
Oh wow, Frontier. That's awesome.
Yeah. Acumen, which is an impact investor, is also a partner on this.
Okay.
we're all trying to figure out collectively, like, how do you make it so the farmers own the processing facility? Because that's really where the money gets made.
Sure.
And from the farmer's standpoint, there's a significant difference when they own it, because when they just own the land and harvest the leaf and then sell it maybe to a factory for processing, they have a very short window to get that harvest to the factory. Within 24 hours, everything that's happening to tea is done. And so they're in a very precarious position, kind of like, farmers who bring product to the farmer's market. If they don't sell it, it's valueless, so they have to just dump it.
Right.
So when the tea farmers harvest the bushes, they are kind of at the whims of the factory. Like, they have to sell it, whatever the rate is, they're buying it. I mean, they're not really in a strong negotiating position. Whereas inside the factory, after it's been processed into the same tea that we drink, that tea can last, we have to say 3 years, but it's really indefinite. So they have a shelf-stable, much more stable product, and that puts them in a much better position, and they can earn a lot more for it. So the sort of stability piece of having finished tea in hand, as well as the income earning potential, dramatically increases when the factory is held by the communities. So those are the things we're working on.
You're doing awesome work, man.
Hey,
That's
cheers.
So cool.
Well, it's a team effort, and I'll say this as well, maybe to get as salesy as I will, that we do have a commitment that 1% of our every sale goes towards supporting the launch of this factory in the northern part. And so, to your point, every time people drink Young Mountain teas, it is directly contributing back to the farmers.
Business for good.
Let's hope so.
Yeah. Exactly.
Business for better, at least.
Yeah, amen. Yeah, constant improvement. I love it.
Do you want to smell it?
Oh, yeah.
This is our most popular green tea.
Oh, yeah. I've actually had a pearl before.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Amanda, whenever you're ready.
Perfect.
This is the first steep. I did it 3 minutes, which is actually a little longer. Usually for this, I do a little shorter.
Oh, yeah.
Like 2 minutes is normal, but I thought we'd go a little deeper.
Similar color to the
white, but pretty different flavor.
Yeah, totally.
Right?
Yeah.
Though somebody once described to me that the way they think of green tea is more like a soup than like a sweet drink, and that was really helpful in thinking about it as like a vegetal brothy soup.
Yeah, more on the savory side.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
I see that.
seaweed, briny, grassy flavor, that's actually intentional.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really brought out, again, like the first thing the farmers do is treat it with heat. And the type of heat that they use determines what direction the flavor is going to go. Yeah. If they use a wet heat, like a steam, then that's the Japanese style of making green teas, where it becomes a lot more of the vegetal, oceanic, kind of grassy side. If they use a dry heat, which is what this has done, and that's more the Chinese style, then it becomes a little bit more roasted, nutty, sweet, floral.
Okay.
And so that's the big determiner in green tea, what type of heat you want to apply right in the beginning.
I love it.
Yeah, me too.
You're in the right business. Yeah, it's almost like wine tasting, the way you were describing the different methods.
It's so interesting because, there's so many like layers to experience of drinking tea. There's like the flavor, or the taste, which is like both the flavor on the tongue as well as the aroma. There's the mouthfeel, like the texture of the tea. And then there's the finish, the way it lingers after. And each of those, can have different desirable qualities or negatives. And it's one of the fun parts I feel in tea is you can appreciate that, like the sensory experience, or you can go into like the energetic experience of the tea, which is totally unconnected from any flavor-related things. Mm-hmm. You get both no matter what. But again, like I do believe the more you pay attention to something, the more you get from it as well.
Absolutely.
And then, the reason I want to do two teas from the same producer, this is also from that same co-op in eastern Nepal, Tinjore, is just to show how much diversity there is in the same plant. This is like literally the same tea bushes. Yeah. The differences are when in the year it's harvested. So the green teas are made in the spring, early summer, versus this black tea, which is the summer into the early fall. So the time of year as well as really the oxidizing or the processing. We'll taste it. It's totally different flavor.
Okay, I'm excited.
Yeah. Oh, I need to bring this all the way up to boil. So the white and green tea we did somewhere between like 160, 170, and this black tea we'll do at full boil.
Okay.
Actually, I'll get rid of this too.
Are you gonna do the initial rinse again? You
Yep.
do that every time?
Yeah. And I guess this probably isn't showing on the camera, but I like this little moon.
Yeah.
I like the idea of pouring tea into the moon.
Amanda will get some B-roll of that, for sure.
Oh, did you want to smell this?
Oh, I do, yeah, thank you. From Nepal.
It's called Golden Black, and that's because, yeah, probably this isn't super visually
I've had this
apparent.
one from you before.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
This is one of our most popular black teas. It's kind of like the black tea everybody's familiar with, but better.
Yeah.
And that's really because both the name Golden Black as well as what we'll taste is the bud, the terminal growth of the tea plant. When it gets made into a black tea and it oxidizes, it goes from this really like almost translucent white color into this golden color. So if you see a lot of gold flecks in a tea, that's a sign of a high quality tea bush. And what's really tricky about preserving that bud all the way from when it's harvested to when we drink it is that it's such a small amount of the tea plant, but it's the most tightly concentrated part of the plant because it's the newest growth. It's really difficult to not get that have that get lost in the processing because when the rolling process is like literally shattering the leaf. But to do it with enough pressure to break it, but not so much so that it snaps it, is an art form. And it can really only be done in small lots. If it gets bigger, basically that bud, the most valuable part, just gets incinerated.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Just looking at it is gorgeous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the smell is super nice as well. And you can see it's a full, we
Yeah.
got a rager.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll do that rinse steep again. Down the moon.
It's become a part of your ceremony.
Yeah.
Yeah,
One for us, one for the moon.
that's right.
That's a little bit more than I should have done for a rinse.
We're not judging.
Light judgment.
A little bit. Do you want to tell us more about where this is grown and everything, or?
Yeah, so this is, I didn't really describe the region. So this is, tea from Nepal is all being grown, well not all, but 99% being grown in the far eastern part of the country, right on the border with India. And right across the border from where this tea is grown is Darjeeling, which is India's most famous tea producing region. So what happened was historically, Nepal has always remained an independent country from India, largely because the British, when they came into India and took over the country, they weren't experienced mountain fighters. Whereas in Nepal, the Gorkha community are these ferocious warriors. So...
I like, my ears perk up.
I forgot what I was saying.
Nepal
the
warriors,
Gorkhas.
yeah.
Okay, yeah. Basically, they stopped the British, and so Nepal has always been an independent country. There's a couple other reasons, but that's the central one. But so right on the border between India and, well, basically as far as the British were able to go, and Nepal is some of the best tea growing conditions in the world. And this is kind of the foothills of the Himalayas, right in the shadow of Everest, where the British set up Darjeeling. And all of the labor, all the farmers that helped build Darjeeling traditionally came from Nepal. It wasn't against their will, but it was not unnecessarily like the most favorable conditions for the farmers. What happened was that eventually, it's a very porous border between India and Nepal. All of the kind of familiarity with how to grow tea, all of the best tea cultivars began coming back into Nepal. So Darjeeling and where these teas are growing, they're neighboring regions with a lot of similar culture, a lot of similar backgrounds of the farmers. But what's happening in Nepal is being much more led by communities as opposed to what's happening in Darjeeling, which is much more sort of a legacy of the British colonial times. Sure. And so it's a really exciting time to be drinking tea from Nepal. I think Nepal, like Eastern Nepal, is one of the most promising and quickly emerging regions. And so, yeah, it's fun to be able to share it.
Awesome.
And it's really a reflection, again, like these folks are mentors to us in not just how to make really high quality tea, but also how to do it in a community-led process. And so, for example, the board of Tingere, the board of this co-op, is one of the first examples I've ever seen in tea where there's women in leadership roles. There's women, about half of the board is women. And that is such a fundamental shift from traditional patriarchal top-down ways of running things. That is just electrifying and exciting. And also, because the community owns the factory, there's something to be gained for the local communities through this work versus when the farmers run the estates. There's not too much that they personally benefit from their hard work. And so what we're seeing in Nepal is that there's a lot of young people entering tea, which, agriculture across the world, it's kind of like there's a lot of work to try and get the next generation in, and there's not a ton of interest because like the call of the cities and more modern life is very appealing. So to have examples where farmers are self-selecting to stay in tea is really exciting, and I think one of the fundamental shifts that needs to happen. If the farmers don't have an incentive, if they don't see the benefit from their work, they're going to leave because who would stay in it if you're just helping make somebody else rich? So that's this tea. It's really representative of a shift of both quality, styles of production, but then also the sort of social context from which teas come out of.
Incredible. And these are the same people that are, like you said, it's an art form to pick it and then to produce it and everything.
Yeah. And honestly, like the particular region that these teas come from, like the exact garden is probably the healthiest tea plants I've seen in my life. They're just phenomenally vibrant tea bushes where whenever we go to do our photography, it's like we know that we'll get the best shots there because it's so freaking alive. They're very proud that they're organic. They also do vermicomposting. Are you familiar with that?
I've heard the word.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar either. It's basically like using worms in composting. It's really like a full closed loop system. Amanda, whenever you're ready, we got some good stuff.
Much darker.
Yeah, and smell it. The aroma of this.
Oh, yeah.
And this is, again, the same bushes as the green tea, just processed in a different style.
Do you feel there's a different level of astringency between the white, green, and black teas?
Yeah. And thank you.
Thank you.
Because for some reason I feel like I'm already anticipating a more astringent tea.
Flavor?
Yeah.
I think
But maybe not.
the green teas typically I find to be the most astringent.
Oh, okay.
Astringency is often a desirable quality. The way one of my tea mentors, Mo from GS Haley,
Shout out Mo.
shout out to Mo, coached me is that astringency kind of forms the backbone for flavor. So oftentimes if it's not there, it feels like a weak tea, like you're missing something. Right. You're missing the strength. So first of all, for astringency to be a positive is one thing. And then the amount really depends on the style, but also how strong and how hot you brew it at.
That makes sense.
Because black tea is using full boil for 4 minutes, that's what we did, versus the green tea, which we did like 3 minutes at 170, it's just less is gonna come out. But if you were to boil, like use boiling water on green tea, which I wouldn't recommend, it does become that wickedly strong astringent.
Yeah.
So it's all in there, it's just how you coax it out.
That makes a lot of sense. I am getting some astringency here, maybe more so than the others, but...
Yeah, actually this is more.
That's delicious.
There's these, actually this particular brew, you're right, there is more astringency than, I probably pushed it a little harder, used too much leaf. But hopefully it's not covering up, there's these natural notes of cocoa, like the kind of sweet honey finish.
Yeah.
And it's more in the lingering finish again. Like, it's not the upfront flavor, it's what remains afterwards. That's actually one of my favorite parts about this tea is the way it just kind of stays with you even after it's gone.
So how many teas does Young Mountain sell?
It's
currently?
around 30.
Oh, wow. That's a lot more than I've realized.
Yeah, which is still for most tea companies just like a super small collection.
Minuscule. Yeah.
The focus there is to find regions that we feel very good about supporting. And it's a pretty tricky process for us to find teas that we're really excited, because once we commit to sourcing, we really want that to be a long-term commitment.
Yeah.
And so it has to balance, like, it has to come from places that we feel good about supporting and that we can learn from at the farming level. It has to be teas that we can sell, so it has to be at good quality. It has to be good enough price that we can reasonably present it.
Right.
And of course, we want the price to come up so the farmers earn more, but we also have to balance that with like what people are willing to pay in the US. And then what we realize over time is, unfortunately, the realities of exporting tea or any goods that move around the world is that the farmers have to have a certain level of proficiency and internal capacity and to like run the admin side of the house to like get the teas out.
Right.
And with US food safety laws just getting more and more stringent and the same being applied everywhere, it's kind of a moving target for the farmers. And so that's another part of our work, is to help work with the farmers on understanding how to navigate shifting bureaucracies between both Indian laws as well, or Nepali laws, and the US's. And so it's a little bit of all of that we have to kind of balance in adding teas to the collection. So as opposed to other companies where they're maybe just like getting a whole wall of teas, like a ton of offerings that is really like giving tea drinkers as many options as possible, but maybe not necessarily getting as concerned with what's happening further up the supply chain. One of the, I think, strengths or limitations of what we do is that because we work all the way back to origin, it just takes a little bit more time to bring something in. But when we do, we're really excited to be able to keep working with the farmers and keep seeing year over year how things change for them.
So it sticks around for a while. That's the goal, just to keep it in the line for years to come.
Yeah, because we don't want to be sort of flash in the pans for these farmers.
Right.
We don't want to like buy a bunch one year and then disappear.
Right.
Because it's a lot about just creating stability for them, for all of us. Like if things are shifting too much, it's hard to plan around a ton of uncertainty. So another thing we try and do is figure out like what's the right volume that we can buy at, and how do we like increase that over time, but like Young Mountain has to grow at the same time. So it's a fun balancing act, but it's a balancing act.
Indeed.
Can I pour you a little more?
Please, yeah.
Great, well these are the 3 teas.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Did you get this one, Amanda? You did, okay, awesome. Well, why don't we kind of transition a little bit. Was there anything else you wanted to say about the tea? Actually, I haven't even plugged the website yet. youngmountaintea.com.
That's it.
Awesome. So youngmountaintea.com. Was there anything else you kind of want to, we'll talk more about it to wrap the show up as well, but anything else you wanted to say about the teas, or before we transition to the next set of questions?
I think we pretty well covered it.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, it's just fun for me to think that this is a snapshot of a seasonal product, right? This is like kind of capturing spring 2022. And so every year it changes. And that's the kind of beauty of specialty single origin teas, is that it's not going to be the same thing year over year. And I guess maybe the one thing that is very central to my long-term interest is climate change is happening in the mountains and is dramatically impacting tea, primarily through the way rainfall patterns are kind of all over the place. And so part of our work is also super early stage right now, but to figure out what are practices that we can support that will allow this beverage to continue to exist, meaning what are climate resilient practices farmers can realistically do. And so we're just beginning to that work now, and we're starting by doing soil sampling of in Kumau, where we're setting this factory, to understand what kind of activity, what's the soil health now. But what's fun, and I didn't realize this is a best practice, thank God we have consultants, is to also take samples of the living tea plants to say like, okay, this is what's happening in the soil now, and this is what is getting uptaked into the actual plant. And so that'll form the baseline from which we can say, okay, this is what's happening today. These are the impacts that we can project are going to happen based on climate understanding of ways soils will change. And here's practices that farmers can do to sort of enhance the vibrancy of the tea bush.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a little rambly. Sorry.
No, it's good. You got a lot up there, Raj. I love it. Thank you for sharing. Well, you seem like the perfect person to ask, because you're a very impressive entrepreneur. You've done a lot over the course of the years. I'm just kind of curious, this is like an herbalist audience, but a lot of them do have their own, like, say, tincture lines or tea lines or whatever. Do you have any just general advice for the budding herbal entrepreneur?
Yeah, a couple things. I think first is if you can find a partner that you like working with, having co-founders is a really good idea. And I think that's just because there's just so much that you have to figure out as you proceed. And to have somebody to share the journey with, as I'm sure you two can relate to,
Absolutely.
it makes it both more likely to succeed and it makes it a lot more fun.
Yeah.
So just to do it with somebody else.
Would you say preferably with a different skill set than your own?
I think it's definitely the case that you need a variety of skill sets to make it work. I was coached on this from one of our family members who is actually like a very successful entrepreneur. That it's kind of contrary to, I feel like, going knowledge recommendations, that rather than select for like the right skill set, to make sure that you really like the people that you're working with. Because complementary skill sets with incompatible personalities, it doesn't really work.
Yeah.
So it's a blend. I think like you have to have the skill sets, but you have to know that you're gonna have to learn along the way. Yeah. And a lot of those skill sets you might have to grow into, because some stuff that you need 5 years in is different than what you need in the first year. And so to a degree, like interests maybe I think is there, but like not necessarily like sharpened skill sets. And to recognize that you can also bring in other people without them being like part of the company to help fill gaps. So
you said consultants.
Consultants,
all the
yeah,
time,
definitely. And especially early stage, a lot of times people are willing to figure out how to work like trades or whatever. Like, but you do need those skill sets. I wouldn't necessarily exclusively like find the co-founder based on their skill set like being exactly what you need, but rather like, do we really like, is this somebody I'm excited to share this path with? And like a lot of challenges, like when shit's hitting the fan, like, is this somebody that I will feel good about? And you can't really know that until you're in the situations.
Right. It's like a marriage of sorts.
Absolutely. So to make sure you have the right partner is one. And the other is really to figure out finances earlier than you think. Because most of us don't go into this for the money. Right. We do it out of passion. But the reality is that the finances do have to sort of balance out. And that is not a skill set that I had at all. Thankfully, one of our team members had not necessarily a skill set, but a lot of interest in learning it, Lucas. And, he has been able to help us develop a financial model that really is like a kind of complicated spreadsheet that connects things. And especially when you're dealing with like physical goods, which require purchasing inventory that has to be sold. And so you have to think about the cash that you need and the projections, like how much do I need to buy? It's a guessing game. To have some sort of data helping to inform that, we have found to be really useful. It's not necessarily the most exciting thing, but I do think it's a skill that is valuable to have, whether inside of whoever the initial team is or just like from consultants to supporters. So I know it's not very exciting, but that would be...
No, it's very practical, which is what we need. We need practicality. So yeah, like you said, it's not going to be... These are just predictions that the numbers are helping give you. So, but like, no, I put off getting an accountant for way too long, but I'm so happy we kind of have a much better idea of what our overall picture looks like now.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess kind of connected to that, one more thing I'd say, and I know we don't want to go, I'm sure there might be other questions.
Sure, yeah.
One of the hardest questions to know is when is it time to go full time?
Yes.
Unless you're super wealthy out of the gates, or unless your business blows up, it's not really an easy process to know how to pay yourself to do the work you love, and also like support whatever else you have, what other commitments you have. And I'd say like to not feel embarrassed about taking on other like side projects. It makes your life a little busier, but it's the reality that for most of us, like there's at some point a leap of faith that you have to take. Like, okay, I'm ready to go all in. But it's a normal process to have to do other stuff, side hustles, to get the business to the point where you can do it full time. And just to say, like, there's no simple formula for that, but it's a very normal part of the process.
I love that, and that's what I always tell people as well. When I started HerbRally, I said, I would like this to be my full-time thing in 10 years. So I gave myself a 10-year window. And then when you set a long-term goal like that, it allows you not to make rash decisions or be impatient or anything like that. You could just focus on slowly building over the course of time. So, all right, finances, patience,
Co-founders.
And co-founders, if you could find the right fit.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, one more thing. One more thing.
Yeah.
Quarterly plans are a really good idea. Like 3 months is a realistic amount of time you can wrap your head around.
Yeah.
And this is a mentor who told me this, like, write down a plan and stick to it. It almost doesn't matter what the plan is, but just having something that you're holding yourself accountable to, because creating our own accountability when we're starting something is probably one of the hardest things to do.
Yeah.
But comparing in 3 months where you thought you were going to be to where you are is a really helpful exercise in getting better at planning the next 3. And so it feels like this kind of like planning step that can feel like, man, there's so much other stuff I need to do. But I really think it's a pretty vital thing. Like ideally, you're doing it like a 5-year plan to a 1-year plan to a 3-month plan to a monthly. But I think just like starting at 3 months is a good first step in kind of building up the familiarity for just checking in with yourself against what am I trying to do? What are my goals?
So I was going to say, can you substitute the word goal for plan? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah.
Are you usually setting these 3-month goals or plans for like the most important thing that you're trying to accomplish?
Yes.
Or is it like a list of a few things?
I personally find if it's more than 3 goals, I don't remember them.
Right.
And really the value of it is not to have it written down somewhere that's forgotten.
Right.
But like, so in the day-to-day, you can think like, am I making progress against my up to 3 goals? Yeah. And keeping it a fairly short like list of the critical pieces has been useful for me because, you know, you get pulled in 20 billion directions, and to know, am I putting my energy into the right things? Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, I have my internal check. Like, am I 3 things, am I making progress against that right now? If I am, then I should feel good. Mm-hmm. And that's an important part as a business owner because you never really turn off. And so like to be like, I'm allowed to turn off. I'm giving myself that permission because I know I put my energy into getting towards my 3 goals or whatever number it is. It's just a very important way for, especially working out of our own house. Right. To know, like, okay, now we're done with work. Yeah.
I guess I'm getting granular with this here, but do you, Mitra, and Lucas all share the same 3 goals, and are you checking in every 3 months on these?
The business has 3 goals, and then we each individually have our own sort of worlds. Yeah. And so, like, for example, like the 3 goals for the current quarter we're in is we've just completed this integration of our operations into this LA-based partner. So it's successful run the holiday season. It's to break ground on the factory, and it's to make sure that we're setting up our next year planning goals as well. So it's kind of like basically like execute on switching over our operations, make progress in the work in India, and get set up for next year as well.
Love it. I feel like I just got some business coaching, so thank you. Amanda, 3-month goals, I like that a lot. Yeah. We do try to set like what is the most important thing that we should be working on, but we never really set a time limit on it. And I know that's really important when setting goals to actually have like a specific time frame. So
totally.
Absolutely. So we got a couple guest questions from my former boss, Raychel Kolen with Muse
Rachel.
Marketing and Design. So if you're looking for some marketing help, check her out. We'll leave a link in the podcast show notes. But I know Raychel does some work with you. She helps with the marketing for Young Mountain, and she submitted a couple guest questions for you. So here we go.
Hi, Raj.
Hi, Rachel.
I'm just here drinking my Young Mountain peppermint tea because it's late at night. Can't have the caffeine. And I'm wearing my Young Mountain t-shirt. But anyway, enough about me. Raj, I have a question for you.
Okay.
So you like condiments more than anyone I know. I'm curious. If you could only pick 3 condiments that you would have for the rest of your life,
I love
only 3, what would they be?
Okay, that's a great question. I have to say the level of condiments in my life since Mitra and I became a couple has increased.
Oh, wow, okay.
Okay, my favorite...
She likes her condiments too, in other words.
Yes. Yeah.
And with your powers combined.
Yeah. I would choose, I'm less of a sauce person. Mm-hmm. I like pickled things.
Yes.
So
chutneys, relishes.
Yes, which we'll be eating later today.
Awesome.
Dill pickles. Mm-hmm. I love a crunchy dill pickle. I don't like the sweet ones personally. Mm-hmm. I forget what they call them.
Bread and butter.
Bread and butter. Those aren't for me. Yeah. So that would be one.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pepperoncini. Like the... I don't know what kind of peppers they are. Like little baby bell peppers that get pickled. Like a little bit spicy.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. and then right now Kalamata olives as well. And like a lot of the food we eat has all three of those.
I love it. So your condiment choices are almost like whole foods.
Yeah.
And are you like chopping these up and sprinkling it on your food, or are you just kind of garnishing it? And
Okay. With the pepperoncini, we regularly waffle between like the whole ones versus the pre-cut ones.
Sure.
And if it's pre-cut, throw it on pizzas or pasta, or I eat nachos more than I ought to. But the dill pickle is just kind of on the side and just kind of crunching on. Yeah.
We got the nachos at Bodega the other day.
Nice.
Yeah, so.
Okay, sorry. Actually, I want to substitute something though.
You're switching one of your three out.
I'm switching one. I don't know which one, but kimchi is also like near and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
We got in the habit of making it actually as a team, Young Mountain, and like the recipe we had was so good that I feel like it spoiled me from buying store-bought stuff. But it takes a lot of time, so I haven't made it in a while here. But good kimchi is like just like fresh, like it's healthy. It's a little stinky for sure, but oh my god, it's
tasty.
so delicious.
Yeah.
So maybe I'd substitute that in for the dill pickle, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
All right. There you go, Rachel.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that for myself too, and I was like, I'm more of the sauce spectrum.
Okay.
But I also figured I'd have to have a hot sauce of some sort.
Yep.
I'm like, do I go like the sriracha route or like the vinegary Tabasco route? I don't know. It's difficult. I feel like the Tabasco is a little more universal, or like versatile, I should say. Like you could use it in a lot of different recipes. So I'll probably go Tabasco, and I really like mayo.
Yep.
And
I have gotten into mayo for the first time in my life in the last like couple months.
Mayo's legit.
Oh my gosh.
And
it's like dangerously like delicious. We were talking about like sweet, like having a sweet tooth. I think I'm developing a mayo. So we'll see what happens here.
I got a mayo too. And then it's like there's like the prepared condiments. Like, do I say hummus or do I say tahini? Because I'm like, you need tahini to make the hummus.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm
like,
actually,
I don't know what the definition of a condiment is.
I think it's anything you do to garnish a food that's not a meal in itself.
I see.
So I think you're on. I think you're correct with Kalamata olives as a condiment. Yeah, you're not gonna eat a bowl full of olives.
Yeah.
So
Meatrice is ketchup, I should say.
Oh, okay. There you go.
What about Amanda?
Oh gosh. I like my pesto.
Yes, actually, pesto was up there for me too.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that.
That and a ketchup.
Yeah. You're not a huge condiment person.
No.
Yeah.
I liked.
Okay. All right, so we just got ketchup for pesto.
I'll go with pesto.
There you
Okay.
go.
I could eat that by the spoonful.
Gosh, it's so good. And there's so many varieties of pesto too. That's unreal. It's actually samin. Fat, acid, salt, heat. Is that the right order?
Salt, fat, acid, heat, I think.
Salt,
yeah.
fat, acid, heat.
Yeah. Somin Nosrat, check out her book. Yeah.
And she's got this wheel of like the anatomy of a pesto, where it's just like nuts, greens, like oil, cheese, and like you can do so many things within that.
Since pine nuts are so expensive, we usually use walnuts.
Which is still, Those aren't cheap either, though.
I probably have to say a quarter of the price of a pine. Like I feel like pine nuts are like $30 a pound every time I see them. But totally. So we do basil, walnuts, olive oil, Parmesan, garlic. Yeah, super dank. All right, here's the second question from Rachel.
So Raj, I have a question for you.
Yes, Rachel.
We've worked together for quite a long time, pre-pandemic, which is forever ago. And I realized I've never asked you, what's with the name Young Mountain Tea? Are mountains even young? Is that even possible? Where did it come from? Enlighten us. Thanks. Cheers.
Yeah, the name Young Mountain is in tribute to the Himalayas, or the Himalaya, which is actually a young mountain range. It's the world's tallest mountain range, and is still going up as it gets created as India goes under Asia. Like the Indian tectonic plate is colliding into the Asian plate and driving the mountains up. So it was to kind of pay homage to the origin and the soul of the work being the mountains themselves. We chose that name. We came up with 3 names and then put it into the Facebook world to get votes early on. And that was the one that won. I'll be honest, it wasn't the one that I thought was gonna. I mean, mine was Pangea tea. Do you remember like Pangea, like
totally
the supercontinent that was like before?
Yep.
I like the idea of like, we're all the same and connected like way back.
Yeah.
But it didn't win. That's probably a good thing.
Do you remember any of the other options for names?
Yeah, I think we had something around the Silk Road, but there's another tea company that was there's also already Silk Road tea, and then so this is probably good that it got shot down. But so we work with farmers within India. There's a movement called the Barefoot College. It's a formal institution, but it's kind of larger than just like this group. It's a movement, and the idea being that so many people in the world don't wear shoes, and so like intentionally prioritizing those populations. They call it the Barefoot College, and so I always like the idea of the barefoot tea. Mitra has later pointed out it'd be really kind of gross to have like something you consume be too associated with like feet. So it's probably helpful that it didn't happen. But the reason it actually got shut down was because it's already a barefoot tea club.
Okay.
So there's some guys that like to drink tea and not wear shoes, and so it's already a claimed name. But those are the couple options that we considered.
I think Young Mountain's the right choice.
Well, the internet circa 2013 chose that.
That's another good piece of business advice, actually, is to poll your already existing audience for decisions like that. So we've definitely done that before as well.
Yeah, and people love it because then they feel connected.
Right, exactly. So awesome. Well, you got time for a couple more?
Yeah, of course.
Sweet. So we've been trying a new segment called Explain That Gram, and basically we're gonna pull up a picture from your Instagram account, the at Young Mountain Tea.
Yep.
Probably on Instagram.
I should know this. Okay. It's like YNGMTNTEA.
Okay. Awesome. We'll leave a link in the podcast show notes and whatnot. But basically, you could just we'll show the picture to you, and you could explain the greater story as to what's going on here.
Sure. Oh, fun. Rachel took that picture.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
That's in Kumaon, the region where we drank the white tea. That's where it comes from. That's actually the exact garden. Okay. That garden is called Chirapani, which is Hindi for split water. It's named after, there's a waterfall at the top of the tea garden that irrigates and kind of provides the majority of water for not just the tea bushes, but the forest as a whole. And so the farmers were harvesting tea. We were there taking pictures, talking to them, and they took a tea break. And so this is a tea break where we're drinking their chai, which is pretty intensely strong. Yeah. So I don't know if there's the kettle in there, but it's like this really old fat. Yeah, you can see it tucked right there. Yep. That's what the tea is poured out of, and they make the fire out of wood. So it tastes kind of smoky black tea, and then they pass around this sugary. It's like a molasses chunk that you bite, and that's the sweetener. Is like you pass around a little bit of that. So it's totally like a communal experience of drinking tea. And so we were just drinking tea together on a break, and Rachel took the picture.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That was probably a super fun trip. I've traveled with Rachel before. Always a good time.
She brings the party.
Yeah, that's right.
She got actually the woman that's in that picture. The one that's directly to the right of, right next to me, Rachel got her to dance. Well, actually, that woman was ready to dance, and Rachel danced with her. And that woman also put on a pair of sunglasses that we brought, which just looked ridiculous, and she was giving the tough guy posing. It was a lot of fun.
One time I went to Boston with Rachel for an event called HubSpot Inbound Conference, and there was probably about 20,000 people there. Yeah. And I remember at one point or another, Rachel was literally in front of all 20,000 people, just dancing.
Yep.
I think she might have been the only one dancing at the time. Very Rachel thing to do.
Totally.
Awesome. Okay, well, just a couple more fun questions. Do you have any plant allies outside of Camellia sinensis?
Ooh, I love that idea of a plant ally. Yeah. So it's other plants?
Yeah, it's just another plant that you have a fondness for, a relationship
with.
Ginger, okay.
Oh, 100%. Ginger is
You hear that?
Yeah. I drink it every morning.
Okay.
I travel with it. Yeah. I keep raw ginger in my pocket, and I just bite off a chunk. I feel like it's good for your throat, good for your stomach. Yeah. It's just like a cleanser. It helps me. I get motion sickness. So actually, when we're traveling in India, there's a lot of driving on pretty windy roads up in the hills.
Yeah.
And gnawing on my ginger is
That's the definition of a plant ally. That's awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Do you use them a lot in your cooking too? Or?
A lot, yeah. Awesome. I've scaled back a little bit in the cooking because I consume so much of it just by itself.
Sure. Wow.
But yeah, like every morning, we actually have a pot that's always full of hot water with chopped up ginger.
That's so
like
cool.
Always running, and yeah. That's
Have you ever pickled it before?
You know, it's so weird. I haven't.
Yeah.
And how much I love pickles and how much I love ginger. It's such a logical thing.
Yeah.
I love pickled ginger, but for whatever reason, I haven't done that. So that's pretty low hanging. Fruit? Ginger?
Root?
Root? Ooh, low hanging root. That's pretty good. You got something.
That's what I'm here for. What do you love about the UP or Marquette?
Oh my gosh.
I told you I was going to ask you this. Don't move here.
There's so much I love.
Yeah.
I love the water, first and foremost. Lake Superior. Biggest
Just right there, right?
That we were a 3-minute walk away from the world's largest body of freshwater by surface area, not by volume.
Okay.
And here's a little fun fact that we learned while doing the lighthouse tour, which is actually really charming. It's the 3rd largest by volume, behind Lake Baikal in Russia, a lake in Africa whose name I can never remember. I feel kind of embarrassed. But then it's Lake Superior. And even in the 3rd spot, it holds 10% of the world's freshwater.
Wow.
So
That's
the
incredible.
first 3 bodies of water hold over 1/3 of the world's freshwater.
Wow.
That's mind-blowing.
That is mind-blowing. I've
Very
never heard that.
significant. So sort of like in the back of my mind is, Young Mountain is one thing that I've dedicated my life to, but dedicating myself and future energy to making sure that lake stays as pristine as it is. Because it's also super cold. It's super clean.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you experienced it, but you look at it, and I moved to Oregon primarily connected to like my love of water and the ocean. And what I found about coming back to freshwater that I love so much is because there's very little life in it because it's so cold, and the salt supports life that freshwater doesn't. It has this purity that you see these shades of blue in the water that are just like so calming. And I think they've said like shades of blue, like that's like actually like psychologically very calming for us.
Yeah.
There's like a unique sense of like tranquility that's really interesting to pair with just like the ferocity of the lake.
Yeah.
It's not like a gentle body of water. People call it Mother Superior. And I just love that it's so changing. One of the things that I remember from last winter's our first time back, is that the shoreline in winter is its own dynamic landscape.
Yeah.
It changes so much. And being able to walk a beach and just get to know that small, it's like a half-mile long stretch. I love the lake. And I love the community. I love the people. I think you were saying like spending some time in Marquette, you feel it. There's like a cheerful, open sense of community that is so inviting, and people are so into just being out. Like they enjoy being in community in a way that I think honestly has a connection to the intensity of the winter. Mitra had mentioned that like one thing we learned last year is like when we got to know our neighbors best was in the dead of winter because everybody has to help shovel the driveways or like snowblow. Like there's like one snowblower and it kind of makes its way around.
Sure.
And like the sense of like we're all in it together and we're not like it's not a passive winter. You can't like just stay inside or you'll go nuts.
Right.
So like leaning into the intensity by going skiing or snowshoeing, it's just relit my love of winter. And so I'd say like the lake, like intensity of winter and just like relishing it, not hiding from it. And just the community that's there are all 3 cornerstones of what I love about this place, and what I'm very excited to dedicate the rest of my life to.
Amen. Yeah, I experienced a lot of that, and I probably mentioned this on the show before, but I'm colorblind, and the other day when we were driving back from the farm, I told Amanda, I was like, look how blue the lake is. Like, even I could see like how intensely blue it was. I never really experienced that before. And you mentioned the community as well. I could not agree more. I was like, am I a part of this community now? Like, it feels like, feels like, like these are my my new neighbors now. So.
Well, in the hat you got Black Rock.
Exactly.
Like, that's like the Cheers vibe, right?
Exactly.
Like, you're in there and it's like, this just feels so wholesome and good.
Yeah. Saw a great cover band there. Black Rock's Brewery was definitely a highlight. We loved it there. So
one of a handful of good breweries.
Right. Oh yeah. Lots of great beer around here. So and tea. Well, I think that's pretty much what I have for you today. Any kind of closing thoughts or?
Oh no, just big appreciation to you and Amanda for making the trip up here to get to know the area and to talk about tea, and to all your herbalism audiences. Best of luck on your herbal adventures, and I hope that Camellia sinensis is part of them.
Amen. What a great way to wrap up the show. So thanks so much, Raj. Thanks y'all for watching / listening, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Herbalist Hour. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good job.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for watching today's episode of the Herbalist Hour. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want more great herbal content, be sure to subscribe to our HerbRally YouTube channel. If you enjoy these Herbalist Hour episodes and you'd like to join us live, you can do so by becoming an HerbRally Schoolhouse member. Learn more at herbrally.com/schoolhouse. And if you want to get your first 30 days for free, use coupon code YouTube30 at checkout. So our HerbRally Schoolhouse members get access to exclusive video classes, monographs, and a lot more herbal community discounts, along with joining these live Herbalist Hour interviews. So one more time, herbrally.com/schoolhouse. Enter coupon code YouTube30 at checkout to get your first 30 days for free. All right, we'll see you in the next episode, and take care.